Welcome to the National Artificial Intelligence Association AI on Capitol Hill series, which features bipartisan interviews with members of Congress about responsible and innovative AI policy. My name is Caleb Max, and I am the president and CEO of the National Artificial Intelligence Association. We're the largest business coalition in the United States advocating for responsible government policies that enhance AI innovation and maintain global competitiveness for American companies building in artificial intelligence. Today, I am very grateful and thankful to be joined by Congressman Bill Foster of Illinois as our very first guest on the AI on Capitol Hill series. I'm not going to call it a podcast, interview series, but it feels a little bit like a podcast. For the first question, I'm very curious, and we're very grateful you spoke at our summit a few weeks ago. What makes you so involved in the artificial intelligence space? And additionally, what is your why behind your leadership in this policy area?
Yeah, well, I start from this being, I guess, the only Ph.D. physicist in the U.S. Congress. Up on the wall there is a picture of Fermi National Accelerator Lab, where I spent 25 years smashing protons and antiprotons together to make particles that haven't been around since the Big Bang. So I was actually on the team that discovered what's called the top quark, the heaviest known form of matter, single subatomic particle that weighs more than an atom of gold. And so actually, if you look on that picture up there, you'll see two giant rings. And in one of those rings, there's a machine that I invented and led the teams that built it. And so I had a scientific career, but during that scientific career, I also did things that were very relevant to AI technology. I first programmed neural networks back in the 1990s when we were using them to analyze particle physics interactions. They didn't work very well back then because we had orders of magnitude less computing power than a typical AI data center will have today. But nonetheless, we tried, and I recognized the promise of the technology back then. Also in my career, I designed and built 10 integrated circuits, computer chips, and I'm very proud that every one has worked the first time, which is not always the case in integrated circuit designs of a new design. And so these are the different pieces that are coming together to make these incredible AI breakthroughs. I'm familiar from the ground up.
Wow, that's amazing. And I assume you'd be the only AI chip developer serving in Congress, I imagine.
I guess so. I don't want to overclaim. I think I'm also the only one who's designed a particle accelerator or designed a 100,000 ampere superconducting power transmission line. Wow. There may be others, but I haven't.
Probably not. I haven't ran across one yet.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about that, because we hear a lot from our companies about how artificial intelligence is going to streamline this research and innovation when it comes to manufacturing, and a lot of the design and testing can be done in that way. Do you believe this is the future of artificial intelligence for manufacturing and research in that field?
Oh, yeah, it's unquestionably, it will be crucial. I still computer program just for the, to keep my brain from rotting more than anything else. And so I've been using these coding assistants, and the rate of progress of AI coding assistants has just been breathtaking. Mm-hmm. A few years ago, they were sort of like a crappy autocomplete, that where you'd get halfway down your subroutine that you were writing and say, okay, I see what you're doing. It would close your loop and get your variables spelled right.
Sure.
And then, maybe 2 years ago, it got to the point where you'd have your descriptive header on your subroutine that said, here's what I want to do, and it would write the subroutine that did it. And now you describe the entire project, give it a few instances of information about what the packages you want to use, what language you want it in, and then boom, it will just do it for you.
Wow.
And this is just an amazing rate of progress. And when you then ask it to do technical things, write a simulation of this or that, it knocks it out of the park. Now, very often, it's sort of right now at the level of having a very good undergraduate assistant, where it will do a lot of the grunt work, but you have to definitely check the work that it does.
Right. That makes sense.
But that's getting better fast.
Yes, it improves every day. It always blows my mind. I want to jump to the policy side real quick here. I know you serve on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, which is very fitting given your background. And given that we just had a framework put out by the Trump administration on artificial intelligence, I'm curious, one, your thoughts on the kind of the layout that they've put forward, and secondly, where do you think the committee will play a role in passing some of these bills.
Yeah. Well, I think that my first reaction reading it was sort of a nothing burger. There's no shortage of policy statements that are too vague to really be actionable in any way. If you're useful policy advice, if you look at it, you should be able to understand the detailed code, the legal code, and the computer code that you have to start writing to implement these things. And the details were not there to do it. So for example, saying, we should provide parents the tools to do things like age verification and make sure that this is really your child and that you have his approval. That's fine. What are the tools at hand to do that? How exactly are you going to have a child verify its age? Because the states that have been, attempting to do this, find there's all sorts of technical difficulties in making that happen. Sort of the best you can do is to provide people a tool to prove they are who they say they are. These are these digital driver's licenses where you can, or digital passports.
And you have a bill for this.
That's right. It's a bipartisan bill to try to get digital driver's licenses. Real ID compliant digital driver's licenses are things where you combine a federal driver's license or other ID with your cell phone, and then use the fact that your cell phone can be used like a security dongle. It has a secret number that makes it inside it, that makes it a unique device in the world. You associate that with your driver's license, your federally provided Real ID driver's license, and then you combine that with the cell phone's ability to recognize its owner. You just take it out and smile at it, and those three things together allow you to prove you are who you say you are, even in an online environment. So
that's really neat.
Yeah. Then it's only those three things put together. That technology was actually all developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technologies back in the Obama administration.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And it's now in Android and Apple together, and because those standards were set.
Right.
More than a decade ago now. Yeah. And most importantly, it's been adopted all around the world, but not in the United States. Every European Union citizen will have the ability to prove they're a specific legally traceable human and not a robot impersonation.
Right.
And they will have this by the end of the year. The UK is on about the same trajectory. Japan and Korea have had internal versions of it, and they're moving to the United States standard ID system that we are not yet adopting. So I have a bipartisan partner in this, Pete Sessions, and he and I are proposing that we at least get resources to the states to accelerate the rollout of these digital driver's licenses.
So is it your opinion then, now that because I know when you were at our summit, one of the big things we were calling for is the White House and leadership in the House to put out a framework of sorts.
Yeah.
Is it your sense that we'll see any of this pass this summer, or is it not going to be bipartisan? Or
there are not enough details to make it worthwhile. It's more like a wish list. Here is how we have to defend our children from non-consensual pornography. Okay, everyone agrees with that, but just putting out a statement of policy that isn't useful. And it's especially not useful when, for example, the European companies that have been trying to go after X for violating this and generating non-consensual pornographic images of minors, that the White House is now attempting to punish the European Union for attempting to stop that from appearing on their children's cell phones.
Right.
And this is not constructive. There are a bunch of technical things that can be done, things like digital ID, things like getting the technical standards for what's called agentic AI, to get NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, to convene industry and other players to make sure that we have the language understood that agents should talk to each other when they're making contracts and so on.
That makes sense. So I think that's...
And they're in fact doing it. That's one of the things, I think that's probably at least partially in response to a hearing we had earlier, I think at the end of last year, where we had White House personnel in and said, hey, you should get NIST working on this because agentic communication is going to be important.
Right.
These are when you have these AI agents and people have personal assistants in the form of AI agents that are doing all of their work for them.
Right.
And then when this happens, it will be very important that we have standards so that basically when my agent starts talking to your agent, the very first thing they do is sort of scroll down and hit I accept, so that they will agree on the privacy and the data retention and the data deletion and everything about what we do if the negotiation goes off the rails. Do we go to arbitration? Do we go to the court systems of California or Florida or Texas or Poland? And so all of those have to happen sort of automatically as soon as my agent starts talking to your agent. And the standards have to be set for those.
Yeah, I agree. Last question, is there anything that our members can be encouraged about regarding this year's legislative agenda and AI policy?
Well, I think there are some very specific things, like moving the ball forward on digital ID that can be useful. The big roadblock that was hit by Republicans, in the previous session of Congress, we had a very active AI task force that unfortunately Speaker Johnson did not renew. And it did very good bipartisan work. I think I have on my desk the volume.
Yeah, it was a very good, thick volume, yes.
Volume of things that could have been followed up on and have not been. And what happened is that we're running into the fact that Congress is very poorly structured to deal with information technology generally and AI specifically. That during that task force's discussions, we realized that any significant AI legislation or privacy legislation for that matter really had to go through 7 different committees. And that means you had 7 different committee chairs that all thought that they should be calling the shots on this.
And then it comes back around.
That's right. And so that when they talked about renewing and maybe strengthening the AI task force, what they ran into is that none of these very territorial committee chairs thought that their committee should be left out of it.
Right.
And so, what we have really is, if you look at most other countries, they have a full standing committee on information technology with maybe a subcommittee on artificial intelligence.
Sure.
And that's because information technology just passed financial services to be in terms of the fraction of the economy. It is now a bigger section than banking and financial services. And very soon it's on track to pass healthcare to be the largest single sector of our economy.
Right. Maybe we should have a select committee on AI.
Or at least information technology. And that's why we can't do privacy. It's the same thing. Everyone agrees that we should have a privacy bill to define federal standards for privacy. And that hasn't happened despite many attempts under both Democrats and Republicans for exactly the same reason. Our Congress is sort of a snapshot of our economy as it existed 120 years ago, where we have, on one hand, we have 7 different committees that claim they're doing artificial intelligence, which means we have 0. Right? And at the same time, agriculture, frankly, which is now under 1% of GDP is farming. 1% of our economy, and yet from a congressional point of view, the Agriculture Committee has all the beautiful office space.
Right.
And so this is a sort of, just to put it in congressional terms,
that
we have to just reorganize ourselves. And if I could have one wish to get the ball moving here, it would be to Congress have a look at itself and let's set up our committee structures so that it reflects today's economy instead of the economy of
Sure. You said you like to use coding apps. Would you mind really quickly saying what your favorite AI coding tool is?
It's Claude Code. Okay. It's been for a while, I think. At least I don't have time to survey the market continuously.
But you're a Claude user.
A Claude user, and not only for that, it was the first one that really got rid of these large-scale hallucinations where if you ask it for legal advice, it will give you real references and not stuff that just things sound good.
Right, that makes sense. Well, Congressman Foster, I appreciate you taking the time and talking to our members. Thank you, sir.